Expect excellence and success with Alan Willett's energetic, inspirational speeches. With a master's degree in the management of technology and organizational development, Alan has over a decade of experience consulting Microsoft, NASA, HP, Xerox, Oracle, Intuit, and many others. Alan has coached these organizations with methods that have revolutionized their quality and productivity. The quality of the customer experience is the key to Alan Willett's philosophy. He is a master at transforming groups of people into high-performance teams bound for success. Now join Alan in his talk, Expect Excellence, how to get the results you want from yourself and others.
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be alive with you right here, right now, right today. So first, to get started, I got a short story about one thing. Anybody here ever hire like carpenters? Yeah. So you ever have a carpenter like show up at your house and they get started and then they disappear for days? And they come back and do a little bit and then come back and do a little bit. And this was a pattern and it just bugged the heck out of me. And then I realized one day that maybe I was doing something wrong. And what I did different, all of a sudden what I did different was I hired the next carpenter and I said, you know what? What I said to the other carpenters, by the way, always was, I want this as soon as possible. I want it as soon as possible. And I'd push them, and they'd give me a start date that was as soon as possible. I changed this. I said, I want this done as soon as possible, but when you come to my house, I want you to be there contiguous until it's done, because I don't like it when it just goes on for a couple, 3 weeks. Instantaneous transformation. All of a sudden, the same person that was here for weeks, living in my house a little bit at a time, is now there for just 3 consecutive days. I love the person. It's great. They do great work. But it was very nice to not have my house disrupted for such a long period of time. It's how we set expectations. So that's a simple example. And my talk is about how to set expectations so you get what you want, results you want from the people that you work with and from yourself. So it's not always this simple though. There's a more complicated story too. So about 20 years ago, I was working with a vice president of a large corporation, and he was responsible for developing a huge product. He had over 400 people working for him to build a software product. That's a lot of code. At that time, it's going to end up being over 2 million lines of code. For that era, that was unprecedented. Of course, now we have systems that are regularly at that size of a product. But then, that was huge, and it was complicated. He had to worry about so many things: integration, communication, putting all these things together. But I think he made one pretty big mistake, and that is, this is a quote directly from Tony's lips, Tony the VP. Hurry up and get it to test so we can start finding mistakes. What was he expecting? What did he get? He was expecting mistakes, and he got lots of them. Mistakes in the land of software are called defects. Has anybody here ever had their computer crash? That's a defect. Or you have an application freeze, or do weird things, or for example, the Mars probes, the ones that crashed, there was 2 of them that crashed. One of them was one simple line of code about the landing gear. Another one was about one system was talking metric, the other one was talking feet. It sort of didn't go together. So what Tony was saying is, I want to hurry up and get it to test so I can start finding the defects. And he got that in spades because people would skip all the right things. To me, it's sort of like, you want to cook a meal fast, so you skip all the preliminary steps, and then it's crunchy or it's not well seasoned, it's just not good. So he was trying to, get his food good by trying to fix it afterwards, as opposed to building it the right way the first time. And it was amazing, too, the impacts of this, because to me it was like he started to worship the defect. The whole organization worshiped the defect. Why do I say this? They built a church. Okay, it wasn't a church, But what it was a test center. They actually built a whole building. I forget how many square feet it was, but it was, you know, a multi-million-dollar building to put in all the test equipment. And they staffed it with a bunch of clerks, clergy, like called testers, that were going to be staffing it 24 hours a day to find the defects that the software developers were busy building. And because the developers were so busy hurrying, getting things to test, they actually hired a whole group of people from college, software degrees that could write great code, that their sole purpose was to take care of the testers, to go down there, to actually be there 24 hours a day, to look at what the defects were and say, yep, that's a problem, I'll go talk to the people that did it. So this is just really amazing to me. So we can do this differently. The sad thing is a lot of the software industry is actually this way. It is still this way. But we can do it different. Because I've seen teams of people transformed from this. So similar to the carpenter, you know, a group of people that are delivering software, their products, you know, million-dollar investments, they're delivering late, lots of defects, a long time doing rework. Same group of people suddenly delivering defect-free software to the test. Tests being very short, customers being delighted, delivering on time. So how do they do this? Well, there's two key parts, really. One is, like talking to the carpenter, it's really setting the right expectations. And the second is, you know, providing training and support so people can actually deliver to this. With my, let me see, how many years do you say? Wow. 35 years of doing this. I've actually learned a few things, and it took me a while to figure this out, but now when I'm consulting, I'm basing my practice on these 5 key principles that I'm going to tell you right now, that you can actually use yourselves too. So, check my notes. Here's the 5. 1, customer obsession, really looking at the customer experience. 2, a focus on quality, and I'll show you what I mean by that. 3, make commitments you can keep. 4, improve, improve, improve. And 5, trust the team, trust the process. So first, focus on the customer experience. It's amazing how easy it is to lose track of this, because I've seen, you know, people get so involved in their day-to-day interactions that they lose track of what the key purpose is for what they're doing. This is whether you're building software or doing services, being a carpenter, things like that. It's so easy. For example, people had plumbers before? I'm sure, yeah. So one example I had was we used to own a house that was over 100 years old. Lots of character, lots of expenses. So we had multiple carpenters through the house. And what we found is most of the carpenters left a mess, big time. It was always dirtier, messy. Once we had a plumber that showed up, and he actually, it was cleaner when he left than when he started. We wanted to put this plumber on retainer. But he actually said he was too busy. He was booked well into the future. He did this as a favor. And I was like, wow. So this is before I learned how to set expectations. Now if I hire a plumber too, I set expectations, by the way. So anyway, it's easy to lose track of the customer experience. We focus on, you know, just the technical part. And I found that even when people are really working about the other parts I've said, you know, focus on quality, focus on making commitments we can keep, they can get so focused on delivering on time, they forget they want to deliver a great product. So when I work with my customers, I always ask that question. Are we focused on the end result, on the end experience? When I work with customers, I always want to make sure, I'm asking myself this in my own business very often, am I serving the end customer? Am I giving them a good experience? It's more than just giving good advice. It's really making sure the advice can be followed, can be understood, that you're taking care of them on a daily basis. So that's number 1, customer experience. 2, it's really important to focus on quality. And what I mean by this is the right focus on quality. If we think about, like, the Vice President, Tony, he was really focused on quality. right? I mean, he really was working really hard to try to deliver a great product to the customers. The problem was he had the wrong focus on quality. He was really looking to test it all in. Now, I want to forgive Tony because really he was wonderful, one of the best managers I ever worked for. It was just this one part he had wrong. And what we've learned since then is, I think, ancient wisdom. I think you've all heard the expression, a stitch in time saves 9. I actually had to look that up to understand it, but it's about like sewing and thank you. If you drop a stitch, it actually takes 9 to recover it. So it really was an expression to say, you know, go slow, watch what you're doing, and the longer after you find that you dropped a stitch, it's going to take you at least 9 times as long of the work you did to recover it. And amazingly, it's about the same like this in software. If you make a mistake in code and you find it in a unit test, it takes you 10 minutes longer than if you took the time to actually do a desk check. Actually, you know, like if you write in a mail note before you hit send, like some people like to sleep on it. It's a good idea, by the way. I made that mistake. So if you do a review of that, you're going to find, this is the data we have. If you do a personal review, the way we teach it, is you'll find 5 to 10 defects per hour in the time it takes to review. In testing, it's almost reversed. It's going to take you at least 1 hour to 10 hours in your, what we call unit test, your personal testing, to find defects and to fix them. So it's amazing that, like what Tony was saying was, hurry up and get it to test. Skip all those possible steps, get it there. So he was actually demanding that it take longer to get things done. So think about this for your own personal work as well. Can we actually take steps to remove defects before they occur, mistakes before they occur, before they take a lot of extra time? Now, I teach a course called the Personal Software Process. And one of the great things about this, what I recommend, is you actually track the mistakes you make and the costs they have and the kind of work you do. What I've discovered was I've taught, I think, over 300-400 people in the personal software process. As an industry, we've taught well over 5,000 people. And I've discovered an amazing thing. Everybody makes mistakes. Now, really, this is kind of stunning because people don't plan to make mistakes, but we actually have discovered that we can plan this. We can actually, for example, with software, you know, we can measure lines of code. If we write 100 lines of code, all of us, if you had the training to write code, all of us will inject somewhere between 1 to 10 defects for every 100 lines of code without fail. And people have a stable defect injection rate. This was amazing to me because I took this and I kept on trying harder. I was recording my data. This is a really disturbing thing about recording your data, about the mistakes you make. Because all of a sudden you realize you do make mistakes and they are costly. And even if you try harder, you're still making mistakes. It doesn't matter. So one of the things I learned was to say this: hi, I'm Alan Willett. I make mistakes. Pleased to meet you. Do you? So this is a really important concept. And the thing we learned with this is with the right focus on quality, we can actually understand the kinds of mistakes we make, and we can work to overcome them, to try to prevent them from getting out to affect the testing, to affect the customers. We can do better. So I highly recommend this. So if you're focusing on quality, as a manager, by the way, you don't have people hurry up to get to test. You really encourage them to do it right the first time. So I have to say, I got lucky. When I was working for Tony, believe it or not, I was responsible for a major subsystem. And the people that were working for me worked on the West Coast, so I would not be able to see them very much at all. So I flew to the West Coast, and again, I got lucky. I did this out of fear. I told the people, I said, okay, give me a schedule, that you can keep, but the most important thing is when I get it on the East Coast, there's no defects in it, that it'll work the first time. Heck, like the carpenter, that actually worked. So I was getting beat up on the East Coast by Tony and people that, you know, my software was going to be delivered later than everybody else's. I said, yeah, but mine will work. And sure enough, when I got my subsystem back, they tested it. They were done testing in about 3 or 4 days. And they said, wow, it's flawless. Never happened before. So all the people that were beating me up were now in test for the next 3 to 6 months, trying to get theirs working. They sort of forgot about me at that point. Okay, number 3. So we focus on quality first. What do we do next? Make commitments we can keep. One time I had a manager come up to me that I've been working with and say, Alan, I wish just once one of my teams was ahead of schedule. Just once they would finish early. Why does that never happen, Alan? I actually was very honest with him. I looked at him and said, Randy, every time you kick off a project, this is what you say to the team. Give me a schedule that's as aggressive as possible. It's like me talking to the carpenter, right? So what do the teams give them? A schedule that's as aggressive as possible, which means that if anything goes wrong, which we have learned we make mistakes, it'll be late. So Randy really had to change his expectations. So when I work with teams now, what I really focus on, when I work with teams, work with carpenters, what I really focus on is setting an expectation that they're going to make a commitment they can keep. And we train people on how to do this because there's some key points here. What they really need to do is they need to focus on building a schedule with detail. And they have to take into account not just, like if you're painting a room. Most of the time, before I learned this kind of process, I would think about painting a room, I'd say, oh, that'll take 4 hours. And for the part I was thinking about, I was right. You know, painting the walls is easy. Now, doing all the preparation and all the cleanup and all the trim work is hard. So that's one part, you know, get a really detailed schedule where you consider all the parts. And now the next other part that I've really learned is you really need to make a schedule that takes into consideration how much time you really have. So like when I built a rock wall in my backyard. And I made a critical mistake here. It was late October. I was going to be traveling most of November and December. And I looked out in the backyard and said, yeah, I can do that. I got all weekend. Did I really have all weekend? That was question 1. No. You know, I had lots of other things to do, family commitments, etc. So if you think about this in pure hours, I thought I had a good 20, 30 hours to get it done. In reality, I only had 8. So that's one thing that you really got to take into account. So details, this. And the third part we teach is actually size does matter in this one respect. You can measure size and you can get a reality check. If I measured the linear feet of this rock wall, I would have discovered that it was over 200 linear feet. And if I actually knew how many hours I had to work, 10, that meant I would have been laying 20 feet of wall per hour. Now, even if I was insane enough to believe that I could do this, with 1 hour, I would have discovered that I could do 1 foot. And I would have discovered that, hey, you know what? I'm going to call somebody and they're going to get it done. Because what happened was, of course, then I was out there when the snow was flying into January and February, still working on this rock wall. So okay, 1, customer obsession. 2, focus on quality. 3, schedule. Make commitments you can keep. And there's a way you can do that. So 4, improve, improve, improve. So I talked about collecting data on defects. So one of the key things I found is if you collect data, if you collect what things have gone wrong, if you collect the things that you care about and look at them, you can actually learn from them. Because if you don't do this, and I'm ashamed to say this, before I collected data, I really realized it was true. You're not improving, you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And you're perhaps doing what Einstein called insanity. You're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So what you need to do is look at your data and see what it's telling you. Collect it and look at it. So for example, I learned from recording my software defects. This will be a little technical for a second. I discovered that I was injecting in Java code these type casting conflicts over and over and over again. You're aware of this. So, but it was really simple to fix this. The amazing thing is about fixing this was I actually prevented making this mistake ever again. All of a sudden, my productivity was higher. My quality level of the end results, which I was writing, was higher. My ability to deliver ahead of schedule was better. So by actually studying my data, putting a little bit of time in it, I was actually able to improve. Now this is true for a lot of things. I found that there's types of personal interactions that I make that have resulted in bad things, right? You know, I make people angry or things like that just by not representing myself well. And I actually track those things as well, and I study them periodically, and I can improve. So point 4 is really collect this stuff and consciously improve. Work on it. Point 5. Trust the team, trust the process. And this is one of the other key things I've really learned about working with teams, working with other people. That's really amazing. It's profound, and it's obvious. The people that do the work should be the ones to make the plans, to be the ones to figure out how to get a quality product, to be the ones to make the commitments. It's really amazing how transformative that is for both the people that you're working with and for yourself as a manager. If you look back to my experience working with the West Coast, for example, again, by accident, that's what I did. I said, I trust you that you can build a quality product. And I trust you that you can deliver on schedule. You are responsible for the plan. Now, at the same time, everybody around me was actually making the plans for their people. And there was an amazing difference here that, again, I was lucky, but I learned from this. My team thought I was the best manager on the planet. I don't know if that's true or not, but they were, you know, just ecstatic. They were highly motivated. They worked long hours to make it happen, and they just really believed in what they were doing. They were committed to what they were doing. Around me, the other teams where the managers were making the schedules and telling them how to get the quality in and, you know, actually dictating, there was really extremely low morale. They were miserable. So again, to me, the difference comes back to really, really setting the right expectations. So when you're not getting the results you want, you really ought to think about what kind of results you're getting and why. And do you have anything to do with this? So those are the 5 points. I want to note that these are my expectations for excellence for working with teams. But I think it's really worthwhile for 2 things. One is, what are your expectations of excellence? I really think it's worthwhile for you to think about what they are. You're welcome to use the ones I've developed. They're very useful for me. And there's a lot of detail that I'm going to be teaching in courses that I give about how to achieve those. But you can think about what you're expecting and write those down. For example, my wife and I, Pamela, spent a long time thinking about what our expectations of excellence are for raising a family. And it wasn't customer experience and focus on quality. We came up with an extremely different list. And it was really useful for us to really guide our parenting principles. For example, one was just know what true wealth is. And it's not necessarily having the bank account of Bill Gates. It's really about the wealth of your relationships and the depth of your relationships. It's about having more than you need, which really changes the definition quite a bit. So it's really worthwhile thinking about what expectations you have for the work you're doing, for the results you want, and how you represent that in your day-to-day interactions with yourself and the people around you. So before I do my close, I'd like to see if there's any questions. Yes?
When you talk about the trust the team and trust the process, were there some type of formal or informal reward or incentive that was tied to that?
No, the question is, when trust the team, trust the process, was there any kind of incentive, reward for the team when we did this? No, there wasn't. And let me tell you 2 points about this. One is, what we have found, because I teach, one of the things I teach is called the team software process, or that is a fundamental principle. What we have found is people are inherently driven to want to do quality work. And it's really sad when they never have the opportunity. So when you give them that opportunity to actually take that on and to deliver and to beat the expectations I set for them, that's a reward in itself. Now what we have found though, in large organizations, this can be against the culture. So in sometimes we actually do have to work on the cultural barriers to this and incentives for managers to give up their illusion of control and give that control over to the team. When the managers can do this, they discover they have greater influence than they did when they had the illusion of control. Did that answer your question? Yes?
I just want to comment on the stitch in time saves 9. I mean, that's been my experience in engineering too. You can be sitting at your desk coding up some firmware. If you don't catch that mistake there, when you go to integrate it in the laboratory, it's 10 times the time. If it doesn't get caught there and it goes down into the factory, it's 10 times to the customer, 10 times, 10 times, 10 times. I mean, it is exponential that way, if I'm using the right term.
Absolutely.
And so it's not just 10 times, it could be 1,000 times, you know what I mean?
So as Carl's comment, if I may condense, is what you're talking about is economics of quality, which is, it really, and it's obvious, the longer it takes to find a problem, the much more expensive it is. If it's in testing, it's really expensive. If it goes to the customer, it's hugely more expensive. And that's really what we're trying to put together, and a lot of the things I teach is how to measure this and how to be smart about it. It comes back to the improve part and the data part, collect and improve. Any other questions? Phil and then Megan.
So a lot of the stories you relate have to do with where managers brought you in, I think because they realized that they were having a quality crisis. What do you do when you're an engineer working in an organization and your managers don't see the wisdom that you're talking about and you want to, you know, be an agent of change? How does that work?
Wow, do we have another 2 hours? So the question, the question is, if I'm an engineer in this organization and there's all this challenging management environment, how can I be an evangelist, an agent of change within that organization? Okay, I'm going to have to do a very short answer and we can talk more later. Okay. One is, I have discovered that first you can focus on yourself and your own personal process. And that's hard to do, but it's actually amazingly possible. It can be challenging if you're in an environment where everybody around you is hurrying up and get it to test to find the defects. Because as my experience was, I got a lot of pressure for being different from everybody else. There's actually one point where this is a longer story, but I had to put my badge on the table and say, if you want to run the project, take my badge, go ahead. And they backed off, and they basically said, you better not screw up. I didn't screw up. They delivered on time, thank heavens. Defect-free, thank heavens. And then I was a hero. But there is initial pressure for switching your own personal culture in spite of the environment around you. The next thing is that you really need to work with your managers. Oh, my timer's telling me I'm out of time. So work with the managers to really show them how the economics of quality work. And this is a much longer discussion. It's really hard. And a couple of the courses I give, I actually have a longer thing that I actually teach people. One, how to establish their own personal culture of quality. And the second is how to start to influence the environment around you. So I'll take more questions afterwards, but I just have a couple closing words. So as I mentioned when talking to people earlier, I had heart surgery last year. And it was kind of no big deal. Why was it no big deal? You laughed when I told you that before. It was no big deal because I actually really do believe, now that I've done this a long time, statistics. And when I found out I needed to repair my mitral valve, I did a lot of studying. I got some experts to help me, and I looked at the ways of doing repair, and I found this way of doing repair that was statistically less than 0.1% fatality rate. I trusted that. You know, yep, so it kills some people. Most of that 0.1% were people that were in much less physical good condition than I was. So I was really confident. What scared me, though, was if I missed that doctor's appointment, it was 100% fatal. So the surgery is no big deal, but it was really a wake-up call for me. We all reach the same end. And I realized that I was really blessed because I had tasted excellence a few times. You know, just the superlative experience of something of great quality that you can say, I could have done no better than this. This is wonderful. And the moral of this story is, the bottom line is, it's really worth it. I encourage people to look at expecting excellence in their own lives, looking at how they do the work and gathering this and really striving for doing wonderfully good work, for striving to have wonderful, good relationships, for trying to inspire that in other people. Because what I have found is expect excellence because it really makes the journey worthwhile. Thank you.